Today on Northern Revolutions, I've got a special guest in studio. Some of you may remember him from a couple videos that we did a couple months ago. My good friend Bob Egan, professional musician, prolific session musician. He's stopping by today. We're going to talk about some more of his favorite records. Bob has had a 30 some odd year career in the music industry. He played with Freakwater. He was in one of the early lineups of Wilco, played on a couple of their albums. He's toured with Billy Bragg. He's played on about 130 albums as far as we can figure. The majority of his work was with one of my favorites, Root Rockers, Blue Rodeo from Toronto. He spent almost 20 years as their guitarist, multi-instrumentalist, pedal steel player. He's a phenomenal guitar player, but is most widely known as a pedal steel player. There's Bob right there. This was the final album that he did with Blue Rodeo, which came out in 2016. This is their album, Thousand Arms. Bob and I have been friends for years, and we share a love of music, obviously, a love of guitars. So the response to the first couple videos that Bob and I did talking about the records that influenced him as musicians was pretty positive. And he said, "Can I come back and do another one? I'm really enjoying digging into my records." And I said, "Absolutely." So he was here a couple weeks ago and we sat down and talked about some more records. So stay tuned for that conversation. Welcome to Northern Revolutions, everybody. I'm joined once again by a special guest, my friend Bob Egan, professional musician, member of the Canadian Music Hall of Fame, got a star on the Canadian Walk of Fame, an expansive discography that we were just discussing. It's been on about 130 some odd records. Welcome back, Bob.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
Bob and I had a chat a couple months ago, I guess now, about some of the landmark albums that sort of shaped him as a musician. And we thought we'd come back and talk about some more records that are important to you.
Well, I enjoyed it so much. I mean, it's just great to talk music. I didn't realize how much I loved music until I was on your podcast.
Well, thank you.
I said, hey, this is a big part of my life.
There we go.
Pay attention to this.
There you go. So what do you want to show us today?
Well, I think the category today, right? We were trying to get all fancy and clever, and I just said, fuck it. Can I say fuck it?
You can say fuck it.
Fuck it. I'll just bring a bunch of records I like.
I love it.
How about that?
Sure. I'm good with that.
Or audio recording. So we'll start with that.
Okay.
This arrived in the mail the other day. And I don't know if you've ever seen one of these. You ever seen one of these?
I have not.
Well, this is my second solo record, which was recorded. What's the date there?
2001's 27th of September.
2001. So back then you recorded on tape.
Right.
So this is my record.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's an 8-track 1-inch. The big professional machines were all like 8-track or 16-track 2-inch.
Wow.
But that is a heavy.
Holy man.
It's probably 25 pounds.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I did not expect it to be that heavy.
It's a reel of actual tape.
Wow.
And this is half my record, so there are probably 4 or 5 songs on this heavy reel of tape. And which will probably never be heard again in this format because I don't own a 1-inch 8-track machine.
But it's a cool souvenir.
Well, I have 2 of the reels, so I will keep one. I'll put the other one up for auction to pay my kids' college.
There you go.
I'm kidding. I'll keep both of them. But so in this day of making records on computers and unlimited tracks, right? Being able to record an entire record with just 8 tracks was crazy. It was fantastic. Number one, because the sound was so freaking rich.
Right.
And number two, you had to be strategic and think about what to put on the record because you only had 8 tracks.
Right.
And I mean, you could dump a couple things down and free up another track or two. Like
I always get fascinated. I'm a huge Beatles fan, and Pepper's my favorite album of all time. And I always get fascinated by hearing those stories about how they layered as much as they did into those tracks. They'd record the 4, they'd fold them down, and I know nothing about recording engineering, but I always just found those stories to be just, they MacGyvered it.
Well, they did. And the thing is, with magnetic tape, every time you play it or record over it, it degrades a bit.
Yeah.
So the fact that they did all these takes and just piled so much on there.
And tape's expensive.
Oh, yes.
I'm obviously the Beatles could afford it, but to everybody else, tape's expensive. It's a consumable commodity.
Yes, I spent a lot of money on tape in the day. Wow. But the beauty of being forced to work within this format, it was a luxury,
right?
Is that you put what mattered on the record, right?
Sure.
You didn't have frivolous stuff. There was no room for it, and the focus was on the songs. And you would listen to this record, or I would today, and I would never think, oh, I wish I had more tracks to add something else.
Right.
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 And probably the one of my greatest experiences in working on this very same machine. This was in Greg Keeler's farmhouse studio, where I made this record. I don't know, probably after this, I was making a Sadie's record there.
Okay. Which one?
I don't remember which one. I played on a number of them.
I know. I've got them all.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I got them all.
Don't remember the specific one, but the engineer was the fellow from Chicago who played with Black Flag.
Yeah, I'm terrible with names, but I know what you're talking about.
Steve Albini.
Yes, thank you.
He also did a Nirvana record.
Yep.
Right, and so here he was. In those days, he worked in a garage mechanic's jumpsuit with his name on it. Right.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and he would never he didn't take producer credit on the Nirvana record. He didn't believe in producers. He was an engineer.
Right.
And he was, he had this no-nonsense sensibility.
Sure.
And I was up there recording on this very same 8-track 1-inch machine and did a take, and I finished it, and I looked to him, I said, "What do you think?" He said, "It doesn't matter what I think. It's your record. What do you think?"
Yeah.
"Oh, you're right. Okay. Well," I said, "well, keep that one. I'll do another." And he said, "No. You can beat it or you can't.
Right. You're
not going to leave work for me to do later on."
Right. Nice.
Oh, it was brilliant. And that has, those two statements by Steve Albini have really been the northern lights for my recording ever since. That I never do multiple takes and listen to them and compare back and forth.
Right.
I just do it until I love it and I think it's perfect, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't accept that from other people either.
Right.
I do a lot of sessions where they say, "Oh, send us a couple different takes and we'll squeeze it together." I go, "No.
I'm going to give you my best and that's it."
Yep. And you'll be happy.
Nice.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
So that was cool to see. I have not seen. I have a piece of somebody's master tape. Do you know the band in Toronto, The Wooden Sky?
Oh, yes.
So I'm a big Wooden Sky fan, and I'm not on their last album, but the album before. They actually, I don't know if everyone that pre-ordered it or whatever, they actually cut up 3 or 4 inches of the master tape and included it in everybody's record, and it's the same.
Wow.
Yeah, but I'd never seen the full, real.
Yep.
That's cool.
Well, yeah, it's probably the only time in my life I'll get to bring that out and anybody would even remotely care about it.
I would care, absolutely.
It's too heavy to nail to the wall. Okay.
All right.
This might be several episodes. I brought
Okay.
up a lot of stuff.
That's all right. Oh, yes.
Howlin' Wolf.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Howlin' Wolf.
Immediately, you make me think of my dad.
Is that right?
Absolutely. You tell your story, then I'll tell mine.
Well, I've never met Howling, but I knew how important he was to the Rolling Stones, right?
Right.
So I looked him up and started listening, and it was just like the human freight train,
Sure.
right? The voice,
Oh,
it just would take no prisoners. And for that and that alone, I'm a big Howlin' Wolf fan.
right.
If you're going to do any kind of roots music, I think you have to know what he was about.
Mhm.
I know that dynamic that you could bring to your own stuff if you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was, so I got into music when I was 14-ish, something like that, which would be the early 90s. My dad was a big music fan, had a big record collection. That's actually his amp and his CD player and his speakers. And he was quite thrilled that I was getting into music. And, you know, as all my friends were listening to, you know, Nirvana and Pearl Jam and whatever, I'm listening to the Beatles and the band and Creedence. That was my entry. And it was partly probably because that's what I heard around the house. So I was getting huge into the Beatles. And my dad's like, that's fine, but I'm going to expose you to some stuff that you're not going to hear anywhere else. And one of the first albums he gave me was Howlin' Wolf's the London Sessions or whatever.
Oh yeah,
which Clapton's on it, and I think Steve Winwood's on
it's
it.
an amazing record. Well, it's weird.
It is.
It's weird, but it's pretty cool.
Right.
I remember having that too as a kid.
Right. So, 16 years old,
Yeah.
I'm listening to that. And I actually don't have it anymore. I had it on CD, and I'm trying to find a copy on vinyl. And when I do find one, I'll add it back into the collection. But yeah, that's makes me think of my old man who's sad. He's been gone for 13 years now, but me listening to music is my way of still having that connection with him. So
Of course, and
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remind you of your dad. Coltrane.
Oh, yes.
Right? You know, casual jazz fan.
Yep.
So I dip my toes in. My era for jazz has got to be, certainly before fusion, somewhere post big band, small quartets and quintets.
Right.
Maybe probably bebop is kind of the thing for me. And John Coltrane, I'm a fair weather fan of the saxophone because I just find a lot of sax players, and this sounds so prejudiced, but they have that Satriani thing where they just overplay and try to impress with the amounts of notes and the leaps and the bounds. Not my thing. And I assume that's what Coltrane was all about. So imagine my surprise when I put this on and hear these luscious, beautiful melodies and these very thoughtful intervals. And then I realized truly what a genius Coltrane was in jazz world. And
Yeah.
it brought me closer to jazz because of his musicality.
I've never dipped my toe in the jazz pond. I listened to a lot of jazz when I was a kid, just sort of via osmosis because it was played a lot.
Yeah.
I just never got into it. And I know I need to one of these days, but it's just it doesn't rank high on my list. It should, but it doesn't.
I always knew it was there, and I started with like jazz guitar, so Django Reinhardt. And
Right.
I always felt an obligation to listen to more because all the heroes that I had in those days, the guitar heroes, always talked about their roots.
Right.
I said, you really need to understand where we're coming from. And,
Right.
And I just thought anywhere I could grab inspiration from, I need all the inspiration I can get.
Sure.
So I broadened my palette a lot. But the thing that just put me on speed dial for broadening the palette was I lived in Chicago, just south of Wrigley Field, south of Belmont there on Clark, during that glorious time when CDs were ascendant,
right,
and vinyl was cheap.
mm-hmm.
And within literally 2 doors of my house was a big vinyl store. And then basically 2 more doors down from that was Clark Street. And right across the street was the first Reckless Records in Chicago.
Right.
And there was I think a Reckless Records in San Francisco and one in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was used vinyl. In fact, that's where this is from, that Coltrane. And you could buy anything for $2, $3, $4.
Right.
And so on a weekly basis, that's where I expanded into anything. I could just take a chance.
Right.
So the jazz, the classical, what they used to call world music, because it was just so cheap. And that's where I really expanded it, my vinyl collection.
Nice.
And speaking of expanding, again with the jazz thing.
Okay. I don't know that one at all.
Well, Coleman Hawkins, great sax player, and Milt Jackson, one of the, I think one of the sweetest vibes players around. Just love the sound of the vibraphone.
Okay.
Lionel Hampton is probably more well known, and he was a bit of a showman, right? A little more of that sassy, jumping around, featuring it thing.
Right.
Where Milt Jackson is just more laid back and in the pocket.
Sure.
And really serving the spirit, I think, of jazz.
Right.
And I just have spent many a night coming home from the bars, raging on rock music, putting this on or putting it on Saturday morning, right? And then just being recharged by music. I really appreciate the work that these 2 guys have done. Milt Jackson and Coleman Hawkins. And speaking of spreading the wings, right?
Oh yeah,
classical.
Of
So,
course.
you know, there's a real barrier back in my day between genres, and I think when I finished university and I went to work in Chicago, I thought I'm making a good amount of money. I was one of the original yuppies. So I'm eating in restaurants far beyond what I was raised in, right? And I thought I was I'm living in a city. Maybe I'm sophisticated. And I thought I should learn about jazz and classical. So I asked coworkers about classical music, and they said, well, here's where you need to start. You know, the Bach, Brandenburg concertos, beautiful, melodic. And to this day, you know, I'm a big fan of the old masters of classical, and nothing like a Mozart symphony to wake you up and
yes,
and appreciate the guy's genius.
Yep.
Have you ever seen the movie Amadeus?
Yes.
There's a lot of factual errors in that, but it's a good enough arc of the genius of the guy.
I did a classical phase when I was a teenager. It might have been maybe 18, 19. I went through this classical phase. I don't know why. I don't know what triggered it, but I was just fascinated by, you know, you hear one of these symphonies, and I would always go, be it Bach or Beethoven or Mozart or whomever, and just kind of go, how is your brain wired that you can put together this sonic tapestry with dozens and dozens and dozens of instruments? And it just blew my mind. And I still know nothing about classical music. Like I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a few famous pieces that most people do, but you can just put on classical. I'll sit and enjoy it and listen to it, and it's still to this day I'm just astounded by it.
Yes. I mean, they build that sonic tapestry from dozens and dozens and dozens of instruments, and the tapestry is 45 minutes long.
Right.
Right. So it's like, I mean, did they have weed back in those days? Like where they drop an acid? It does blow my mind.
Right. I mean,
so
I can't even fathom playing a single instrument nonstop for 45 minutes, let alone getting your brain to figure out the interplay between that instrument and all the other instruments that you're writing parts for. I just
create something compelling from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, simply. And when I would listen to classical, I would try to steal. I would say, okay, there's that little phrase. What if I pull that over to guitar or steel guitar, right?
Sure.
You know, that's
yeah.
So, you know, I mean, there's only
so many notes in the world.
Yeah, and they're some of the most beautiful melodies in the world.
Of course,
come from classical. So
yeah,
I look to steal from there, or I would try to figure out, you know, in the Nashville numbering system, what chords they're on.
Right.
Is this a 1-4-5 song? Where's the 6 minor? Where's the 2 minor?
Right.
And you kind of go, okay, we're starting on the 1, and then is that a 7? No, it's a 2 minor. Oh my God! Right.
Yes.
And I said, because if I could steal that chord pattern, then I've got original music.
Absolutely.
Who's going to think I cribbed from from Beethoven?
We won't tell anyone. Only 153 people are going to watch this.
One of the greatest artists and records of all time.
Oh yeah, Leon Russell. Absolutely.
Leon Russell, right? Oklahoma boy. Got his professional start with a Wrecking Crew.
Mm-hmm.
You know, backed up, of course, the Beach Boys, Sonny and Cher, Jan and Dean, the Monkees, everybody that played there, Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a story of Frank saying, you know, who's that freak, that girl playing the piano, right? It was Leon. But then he at one point, and I think I said this, I must have had a Leon record.
We did, yeah, in the last one, yeah.
Yeah, he was the top touring artist back in 75 or 76.
You showed like it was like a country record.
Oh, yes. Hank Wilson's Back.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah, that was it.
Well, this record is Leon Russell and the Shelter People, and he's got 4 different bands on here. It's 11 songs with 4 different bands.
Wow.
And they're crazy. So it's all of these players that went on to play with everybody else. You know, that was his thing.
Right.
He put together Mad Dogs and Englishmen and a number of these things. So he's playing with all the Muscle Shoals people, you know, David Hood and Roger Hawkins on a couple of songs. And then his friends in England, you know, Jim Price, Carl Riddell, Jim Gordon, Chris Stainton, Jesse Ed Davis, right, the indigenous guitar player, most famous for the guitar solo on Doctor My Eyes.
Yep.
Right, with Jackson Brown.
Yep.
Carl Riddell. Like, it's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful record that just shows kind of the breadth and depth of Leon Russell at his height. And, of course, released on Shelter Records, which was his own label.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Back in, it's probably early 70s.
Yep.
Very ahead of his time.
Yep.
Oh, yes. Yes. Hot Licks, Cold Steel, and Truckers' Favorites. Commander Cody and his Lost Planet Airmen. Oh, my God. Truck Stop Rock, Truck Driving Man, Rip It Up. It Should Have Been Me. Semi-Truck. Kentucky Hills of Kentucky. Looking at the World Through a Windshield. Diggy, Diggy, Lie, Lie. Diggy, Diggy, Low, of course.
I know that one, yeah. Huh?
Yep. Mama Hated Diesels. Oh, what a tearjerker that is. This band was just, they were all hippies, I think from Michigan. And then they moved out to LA and they had this shtick where it was like an 8-piece band and they just did country music made by hippies. So it wasn't country rock. It wasn't that Graham Parsons thing at all. This is truly country made by these hippies, right? And they all smoked dope and were quite open about it. It was just, at least in our Midwestern town, just a way to enjoy country music and how they ripped it up and had fun and great dancing music. And boy, this is their ode to trucks. You can see on the back cover here, the beautiful, beautiful assortment of trucks that they're using as the border for vinyl. You don't see that anymore, huh?
I gotta say, I mean, I heard of Commander Cody, but I don't know that album.
Yeah, I think his big hit was Hot Rod Lincoln.
Yeah, I know that one, yeah.
Or the favorite that we would sing throughout high school, that I got the Down to Seeds and Stems Again blues. Right?
Right.
When you run out of weed and all you have are sticks and seeds.
Oh, fantastic.
I know.
That's a promo copy, too.
Well, yes, I used to work in a record store.
I didn't know that.
I managed a record store for a number of years, yes.
Huh.
Co-op Tapes and Records in Lincoln, Illinois. Anybody there from Lincoln? Hello. So when this record came out, I got the promo copy because I managed a record store. Then he came through town, I don't know, on this tour. And I got, second row seats to see him.
Oh, wow.
And it was the first time I saw Tom Petty. So this would have been...
I regret I never got to see him.
80, 81,
yeah,
I think. Yeah.
That's a fantastic record.
It is such a fantastic record. And what you realize is that the die was cast so long ago.
Oh, yeah.
For this guy and his greatness.
Yes.
Refugee.
Oh, yeah.
Don't Have to Live. Here Comes My Girl. Right? Century City. Don't Do Me Like That. And these are just classics from, 50 years ago now.
Yeah.
And he had it all going on, and the girls just loved him.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a shame we lost him as soon as we did.
Well, it was. But boy, he sure left us with a lifetime of music.
Absolutely. I've been really enjoying the stuff that Mike Campbell's been doing since then. He's got his band, The Dirty Knobs.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah? I haven't dug in that deep.
It's good. I mean, it's Petty-esque. It's Petty-esque. And Mike Campbell does the best Tom Petty impersonation. I mean, he doesn't do it in an impersonation kind of way. It's just his vocal styling is very similar to Tom Petty.
Well, I would imagine.
So,
both from Gainesville,
right? So, when he does a Heartbreakers cover in concert, you could close your eyes and think that that's Tom Petty.
Yeah.
But the stuff he's done with the Dirty Knobs, they put up 2 albums.
Okay.
Fantastic.
I've seen footage and it looks great, right?
Yeah.
And he's having fun.
Yeah.
So good for him.
And I love the stuff he did with Fleetwood Mac too. But it's nice for him to do his own thing now. So.
Well, he's a musician, right?
That's right. Those Dirty Knobs records are great.
Fantastic. All right.
Well,
next up, the great Bob Dylan.
Oh boy.
There you go. Y'all know this record, Infidels.
Yeah.
You're not a Dylan fan.
I'm not. So I've got a friend on YouTube. His name's Glenn Calloway. He and I do a live stream on Wednesdays where we talk about record stuff. Huge Dylan fan. I'm not. And he and I have had endless conversations about why I don't like Bob Dylan. And I've tried. I just picked up Blonde on Blonde.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to like Bob Dylan.
Yeah, it almost seems like I do because I seem to be the minority. I mean, I don't know anyone else that doesn't. One of my favorite bands in the world is The Band, and obviously they are very closely affiliated with Bob.
Yeah.
I just can't get into him. I love the stuff that his son Jacob does.
Yeah.
I just can't get into Bob.
You don't have to.
Well, Glenn Calloway, you heard it. I don't have to.
Glenn, get off his fucking case. Dude, guy doesn't like Dylan, so what?
There you go.
Bob's got enough fans, by the way, Glenn.
Right. Glenn loved your story about meeting Jerry Garcia, by the way, because Glenn is a huge Dead fan.
Okay. Well, all's forgiven, Glenn.
No, I prefer you tell him fuck off. I don't need to like Bob Dylan.
Well, this record is, and I don't love every Bob Dylan. No, I don't idolize anybody.
Right.
But the breadth and depth, over 60 years,
right,
or more, is just like to me, it's undeniable. And there are things that just touch me. And I think in our previous episode, I brought in Blood on the Tracks.
You did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I think is just stunningly beautiful songwriting and delivery. The fact that half of it was made with his brothers, buddies in Minnesota.
Right.
Just regular guys, not studio guys. And
right.
The emotion came through. And
sure.
I love that. this one I like because of the feel of it. He's playing with Sly and Robbie,
Mm-hmm.
right? So a bit of that reggae feel to it, and he's got Mark Knopfler and Mick Taylor
Mm-hmm.
from the Stones on guitars.
Yep.
So just a very, I don't know, very rich feel. I enjoy this quite a bit, and I realized years after the fact that I went and saw him on this tour. So I don't know when this came out, but it was shortly after this came out in Chicago at the Angora Ballroom or Avalon Ballroom, big theater, probably 2,000, 3,000 seat theater, and I found out later, long before I knew these guys, 20 years before I knew them, that Blue Rodeo was in town that night on a night off.
No kidding.
And I believe it was Jim and Basil were at the same show.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because he opened up with Joker Man and did
Right.
like a 15-minute version of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And years later, your paths would cross.
Yeah, for quite a while.
Isn't that something?
Small world.
Indeed.
Small world, kids.
Rye Cooter. Yes, sir.
Seminal record.
Yep.
Now, Rye, I go hot and cold on. He's a lot of people who like Rye put him as this genius, right? And he's not a genius. He's a great player and a very tasteful guy. I mean, and he's done amazing work in his career. And he's an archivist. He's a musicologist, and he makes no bones about that. But this record has the distinction, it's called Bop Till Ya Drop, of being the first fully digitally recorded and mastered
Is it?
record.
Okay.
Yes. And so the sound on it is just, I think stunning. What else lends to this record is that his cohort in guitar on this is David Lindley.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So Cooter and Lindley is a very, very rich and dangerous pairing of guitarists.
Sure.
They each have their distinct style, and they have these different slightly edges of chorus on their guitars,
Mhm.
so that the guitars really, I mean, these days it might seem a bit processed, but back then it was just stunningly beautiful, rich, textured guitar tones and idiosyncratic playing. And of course, with David on lap steel and Rye on bottleneck, some of the greatest slide playing out there.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Chaka Khan makes a guest appearance, and I'm sure that the drummer is, of course, probably Tim Drummond on bass.
Okay.
Also played on Slow Train Comin' Dillon and lots of things, but Jim Keltner on drums.
Yep.
Right. Crazy stuff. But the other thing about this record, he's got this beautifully, what do you call that color on his Stratocaster?
That is probably Lake Placid Blue.
Lake Placid Blue Stratocaster that was modified for him.
Okay.
A one in the world kind of modification.
What did he do?
Well, he played in many open tunings. So he had his whole bridge plate was like a Lazy Susan, and he could rotate it like 45 degrees, and things would click in and take it to a different tuning.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's clever.
It was incredibly clever. The guitar was stolen at the No Nukes benefit.
Right.
A couple of years after this, and it's never been seen.
Never been
again.
seen.
Yeah.
It sounds like you can resell it.
No, you
So
can't.
whoever's got it
has got it.
and they got it.
Taking it to their graves.
Wow. I have that record down there.
Of course you do.
Linda Ronstadt, in my mind, is the greatest female vocalist ever.
She's right up there. I'm with you on this. And I think this record is the one, Heart Like a Wheel, that shows her in her best light.
Agreed.
The songs she has chosen, you know, the instrumentation, the arrangement, the players, right? It's the Southern LA pros, and they just deliver.
Yep.
Again, these days it might not seem authentic, it might seem too produced, but it was just of its day, just so gloriously showcased her voice. I mean, side 2 opens with the beautiful Everly Brothers tune, When Will I Be Loved?
Yeah.
And followed by Willin', one of the greatest Lola George Little Feat songs ever.
Yep.
Followed by a Hank Williams, I Can't Help It If I'm Still in Love with You.
Yeah.
Just stunning, stunning music.
Probably my favorite Ronstadt record. Well, you know what? It flips. It's that or Simple Dreams.
Right.
Because Tumblin' Dice, the Stones song, her
Right.
cover of that is my favorite song of all time by anybody in the history of music. And both of those albums are just outstanding. Her voice is incredible. Waddy Wachtel, one of my favorite guitar players on earth.
All over this stuff, right?
Yep.
And of course, big nod to Canada for you, those watching from south of the 49th parallel. She covers an Anna McGarrigle song, Heart Like a Wheel.
Yep.
Little nod to Canada.
Great album.
And I don't know if people remember that she dated Jerry Brown for a while, the governor of California.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Did not know that.
Good for Linda.
Yeah, good for her.
A little plug to my Chicago Cubbies for you listeners from Chicago out there. Sorry.
I don't want to talk about baseball because
You shouldn't.
I shouldn't. Maybe I should just cover up my hat, maybe.
So, stretching out my taste, of course, this has got the Reckless Records sticker right on it, up in the upper right-hand corner. King Sunny Ade. Afro beat from Nigeria. I think it's Nigeria. I'm almost positive it is. They call this juju music.
Okay.
Juju. And it's just mesmerizing, hypnotic. Most of these songs are one chord, and you know the with the melodies and the background singers and the percussion. But the thing King Sunny Ade had was a lap steel player.
Oh.
In African music.
I wouldn't think that would go together. But
Once you hear this music, you would say that's what lap steel is for.
Oh, okay.
Because it's such a great counterpoint to all of the percussiveness.
Okay.
The long legato lines that bring in a melody B section, to let things breathe.
Right.
And I had the great pleasure, and I'm pretty sure it was King Sunny Ade, playing at a folk festival, either Edmonton or Calgary. I'd like to do the research on that, and got to sit and talk with his lap player for quite a bit.
Nice. And
watch the band, and they just loved that somebody was so interested. I got invited back to their hotel room to party.
Oh boy.
Yes.
I can imagine that story.
No.
I've heard some of your others, so.
Yes. That's for the.
That's not for camera.
That is not for camera. No, there was nothing to worry about there. One of my guitar heroes in the early days, Leo Kottke, a kid from Minnesota who played finger picking and flat picking guitar, solo guitar. It just fast and mesmerizing and beautiful melodies. He was, back when this came out, which was in the mid '70s, I think. There were a few folks like John Fahey and people like that, and he was certainly right up there. He was one of these new voices and new ways to showcase acoustic guitar. And his big thing is he played a lot of 12-string guitar, and with slide as well, just gloriously beautiful. Now, funny story here, he's got a couple songs with a steel player on it. It's a guy, I don't know, from suburban Minneapolis, named Cal Hand. Never heard of him before or since this record. But back in the early 90s, when I was playing with Freakwater and then with Wilco, I got to know Eric Haywood, who's a beautiful, beautiful pedal steel guitar player. And he first came onto the scene, onto my radar, when he played with Sun Volt.
Okay.
So those great Sun Volt steel parts on the early records, all Eric Haywood.
Okay.
And he did a couple things that I actually stole from him and I've used to this day, right? Back then, everybody played steel guitar through pedal steel through solid state amplifiers because you wanted clean and clear. He played through tube amplifiers, gave him a bit of a really unique voicing and a grit when he dug in. And steel players always used reverb to make it sound bigger and give it that glorious sound. Didn't touch reverb. He used a touch of delay. Which set it out. And ever since I learned that from him in the 90s, I've played on tube amps with delay as opposed to solid state with reverb. So thanks, Eric, if you're listening out there. But Eric has gone on to play with everybody. He's done tours with Chrissy Hind from the Pretenders, Ray LaMontagne. He did an entire Kathleen Edwards record. He's just really got.
Which Kathleen record?
I can't tell you. I don't know the one. I know when he came in.
I have many of them. That's why I was just curious.
Yeah, I know when he came into Toronto to record for a couple of days. We hung out and had a few beverages together and caught up. But I remember one day I said to Eric, our paths would cross quite a bit. I said, you know, I hear a little bit of this guy in your playing. There's this old Leo Kottke record with a guy named Cal Hand on it. And you said, sometimes you sound a little bit like him. And he said, Cal Hand was my teacher.
No kidding.
Yes.
Wow.
So my hero of Americana alt steel pedal steel guitar, Eric Haywood, learned from the guy whose playing I admired on this Leo Kottke record probably 15 years or so before I met him.
Wow. That's a neat story.
Small world.
Yeah, of course.
Small world. This actually doesn't even need to be talked about.
No.
No.
Of course not.
You all know this. One of the greatest records of all time. Broke so many rules about making records. I don't even think people followed up and stole anything from her. It was just so far out there and so beautiful. It was like, she's in a category all to herself. Let's just move on with what we're doing. We'll make changes elsewhere to try to emulate this.
Yep.
Not going to happen.
Yep. I mentioned to you before we started that when Gordon Lightfoot passed away a month or so ago or whatever, I did an episode for the Violent Community podcast where we talked about the importance of Gordon Lightfoot and his legacy, whatever. And I as the Canadian host of said episode, was trying to talk about his significance in the cultural landscape of Canada beyond just the musical part of it. And that led into sort of a segue where I made the illusion that he's part of sort of the Canadian Mount Rushmore of music, which includes Joni Mitchell. Just Mitchell, Lightfoot, Young. I mean, incredible. And I was so happy to see she did that concert a couple weeks ago.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah.
And at that age, and after she's had health problems and...
Oh, well,
it's just incredible.
Major strokes. And had to learn how to walk and sing and play guitar again.
Unbelievable.
Good for her.
Yes.
Right? I mean, and she was revered and admired and held to this day, but in her heyday, in such high esteem from some of the greatest musicians in the world, right?
Yeah.
And they all kept telling her the story that I recently heard, the horns and a lot of the musicians on the Court and Spark record were the Tom Scott and the LA Express Band, who were kind of a pop jazz standard at the time.
Right.
And they said, we're not jazz enough for you.
Yeah.
You got to go heavier.
Yeah.
You got to go these guys, Metheny and Pastorius, right?
Yep.
And yeah, you got to go the next level up. You're beyond us.
Yeah.
Yeah, great compliment.
Yes.
And she did.
Yes. She was incredible. Is incredible. I shouldn't say was. She is
Yes.
incredible. You know, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear your reverence for her, because I'm a music fan, right? And I talk about how important she is and others like her. And not to, make your head any bigger, but you were part of a arguably Canadian musical institution in Blue Rodeo. A very important band in the musical history of this country. And to hear you as part of that, entity have that same reverence. I mean, it's one thing as a music fan to have that reverence, but for someone who is crafting music that contributes to that musical tapestry that we have, to have that same reverence is an interesting perspective.
Well, it's difficult to have reverence for someone other than yourself, but I work at it.
There you go. He's modest, folks. He's very modest.
Oh my goodness. Look at this, huh?
Oh, yes.
You gotta love this soundtrack.
Yep.
I mean, this is Ry Cooder. One of those things he does, right?
Mm-hmm.
This soundtrack that he made for this movie.
Yep.
It's him, David Lindley,
mm-hmm.
and Jim Dickinson.
Okay.
Right? The Memphis producer.
Mm-hmm.
The fellow whose sons are the North Mississippi All-Stars.
Yep. We talked about them in the last video.
Yeah.
Yep.
The son who played, or the guy who played piano on Wild Horses,
mm-hmm.
the Rolling Stones, and who produced Big Star.
Yep.
Alex Chilton. But just a great sonic soundscape that really, with you close your eyes and listen to this music and not know the soundtrack, you would say, oh, it sounds like the barren Southwest, dry, arid. They just really captured it.
Mm-hmm.
In a beautiful, beautiful soundtrack.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Look at this.
That's a beautiful soundtrack.
I have 2 copies.
You got 2 copies.
Okay, this one's newer. I'm going to present you with my used copy of Paris, Texas.
Wonderful. I will happily play it. I'll add it right onto the top of my now playing pile. Thanks, Bob.
It's the least I can do. Foundational record in my life that changed it.
Yeah.
Y'all know this one. Let It Bleed, huh? The Rolling Stones. So this is the record right after what many critics call their disastrous take on Sgt. Pepper's Satanic Majesty's Request.
Yep.
Where they got weird for the sake of being weird, and it didn't really catch. So they got back to their roots on this record. Were there hits on here? They did like a country version of Honky Tonk Woman.
Yes, I know that.
Called Country Honk.
Yeah.
You Can't Always Get What You Want is the big...
I don't mind that song.
Is the big hit from here. But otherwise, it's kind of them getting back to some of their country roots here.
Sure.
And there's a few stories here. Well, number one, on You Can't Always Get What You Want, they had Al Cooper, probably best known for the seminal organ lick on that Bob Dylan song that changed the world, Like a Rolling Stone. Managed to show up for these sessions, and he played the organ and the French horn in the introduction of You Can't Always Get What You Want. That's Al Cooper.
Okay.
But the bigger dirt here was that before they made this record, they brought Ry Cooder over to play with them.
I didn't know that.
Yes, I think Brian Jones had been showed the door in the band,
mm-hmm.
and subsequently died.
Yep.
And they were auditioning all kinds of guitar players, right? Roy Buchanan,
mm-hmm.
and they had Ry come over, and they jammed with him and they played with him. They made a little record one-off called Jamming with Edward,
Okay.
which is a compilation of some of their sessions with him. But Ry showed Keith the open tuning, the open G tuning,
Right.
that he used so much for Bottleneck and
Right.
for this stuff. And the rumor has it that they cut this record with Ry on guitar,
Oh.
playing that tuning, or many of these songs. And after Ry left, they went back and wiped his tracks, and Keith recut him using that tuning.
No kidding.
I think that's the rumor. If somebody could substantiate that, that'd be great. And Ry has never forgiven him from that.
Really?
But of course, what happened was, as Keith was doing that, he broke the high string on his G tuning.
And has never played with it since.
Yeah, never replaced it, and that became his iconic
Right.
5-string tuning of for all those classic songs.
Right.
Give Me Shelter,
Yep.
Brown Sugar, Honky Tonk Woman.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So they owe a big debt of gratitude to Ry Cooder, whether they wiped his tracks or not. Ry is actually on this record. He ends up playing mandolin on one song.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Stones are, it's funny. I just did a video last night that I haven't uploaded yet where I talk about a few records in my collection that may surprise folks that I own. And I show a Stones record, Steel Wheels, because I don't like the Stones. I
know that.
I there's a few songs I like. 19th Nervous Breakdown is all right. Ruby Tuesday. But that's about it. It's not for lack of trying. I just don't like it. And that record was given to me by somebody that was purging some stuff from their collection. I showed it. I'm like, I've got it. Don't listen to it. Not a big fan. I don't. And again, I like Dylan. I feel like I'm not a fraud as a music collector, but I'm just like, how can I not like these guys? Because everybody else does, but I just don't get it.
You don't have to like the Stones, and I think many of your listeners will write in to say, well, if you're thinking of liking them, Steel Wheels is not the entry
No,
point.
true. I'm just that's the one that I happen to have that was given to me, and I know there's many other places to start, and I've tried. It just doesn't. Well, I don't like mustard or ketchup either, but for no particular reason.
Well, this is going to be a very short session. A very short session. Well, and the Stones just keep popping up.
Yep.
I don't know if your young son, who's roughly the same age as mine, has seen or heard anything about that show Wednesday.
He's heard about it. He hasn't watched it yet.
Yes, well, one of the most iconic scenes there, of course, is this classical version of Paint It Black.
Yep.
And which my son was fascinated by, my 8-year-old son now, fascinated by it. And then, I played him the original, and there was 2 weeks straight when he would do nothing but sing those lyrics back to me.
Well, that's great.
Yes, he could dance around and do all the Mick moves and the sitar moves.
No kidding.
Yeah, so get ready. The Stones are coming back.
Well,
mark my word.
That may not be the worst thing.
All right, where are we? Okay, influential records. Oh yeah. Gotta love Burt.
Who doesn't?
Burt Bacharach.
Who doesn't?
The man, the melodies, right? The lyrics. He was the guy in the day. Recently passed.
Yep.
But boy, oh boy, could he write a pop song, old school, right?
Yes.
And just really dedicated to his art as a composer.
Mm-hmm.
I met him one night in Tipitina's in New Orleans.
Really?
Yes. He was there with a date, a very young gal, and he wasn't paying that much attention to her. It was a blacktop showcase. It was a night after the Heritage and Jazz Festival down there every year, and so the record label down there, Blacktop, was having a showcase, and he was really interested in the other artists and everybody, and I ended up buying his date drinks.
You stole Burt Bacharach's date.
I didn't go that far, But I did actually talk to him for a bit, and I'd been to New Orleans maybe, I don't know, half a dozen or more times by that point. And so it was his first time in New Orleans, believe it or not.
Wow.
And so I welcomed to this city like it was mine. And
Right, of course. Why wouldn't you?
Hey, Bert, here's how it goes. I got some good music. You like music? What's this?
Yeah.
Me and Bert, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for all you deadheads out there. Bobby Weir's first solo record. This was done in the height of their powers, right? The kind of the Mars Hotel era when Jerry Garcia released his first record. And in fact, this is the backup band for Bobby Weir's first record is the Grateful Dead.
Imagine that.
Yeah, and just classic songs on here that became a big part of the Dead canon. Any old Deadhead will love this record at least. Who could forget Dillard, Hartford Dillard?
Yep.
Right? John Hartford, probably best known for writing what song for Glenn Campbell?
I'm going to guess Rhinestone Cowboy? I don't know.
No, the
Wichita Lineman?
Gentle on
My Mind.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a John Hartford song.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I always assumed Campbell wrote that.
Yep. And I think he was part of the Glenn Campbell show.
Could have been.
He was the banjo player.
I think so.
Yeah. Anyway, great songwriter. Teamed up with the Dillard brothers, right? So Dillard, the Dillards were friends. I think they were from Missouri with Gene Clark, the original singer for the Byrds.
So, yeah.
Right? And then the Clark Dillard expedition, he did records with them after the Byrds, and they were just part of that whole scene. And this was one of my favorite post-high school records because they had these great songs on here like Two Hits and the Joint Turns Brown. Classic stuff. By the way, John Hartford was also a riverboat pilot. And he was licensed to pilot paddle wheelers.
Really?
Yes, on the major rivers of North America. And in fact, a good friend of mine from Henry, Illinois, Tim Miller, if you're out there, woohoo! Actually co-piloted with him and crewed with him on his ship a number of times.
Really?
And became very good friends. Yes.
Huh. Okay.
Seminal record of the day. If you were a revolutionary in the late 60s and early 70s and didn't own Volunteers by Jefferson Airplane, you were a nobody.
Yep.
In retrospect, not that good of a record, but a big political statement because their song Volunteers was, all about revolution. Let's overthrow the country.
Yep.
And so what I didn't realize reading back about the history of the Fillmores is how big of a band they were.
Yeah.
And how big of a draw.
Yes.
They had their big hits, White Rabbit.
Yes, love that song.
Very big hit for them. And Don't You Want Somebody to Love?
Yeah.
Great songs. And but they were a huge draw for a long time.
Love that band.
Yeah.
Surrealistic Pillow, one of my favorite albums.
It's a little out there for me.
I love it.
A game changer for me. Rodney Crowell.
Yep.
A Texas songwriter guy. First came to my attention with Emmylou Harris's Hot Band.
Yep.
Played rhythm guitar and harmonized with her. And shortly after his stint in the Hot Band, ended up becoming Roseanne Cash's first husband. And just a beautiful songwriter. And put out, this is his first record. Interestingly enough, he just put out a record produced by Jeff Tweedy of Wilco that has this exact same cover layout to it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a photograph of him off to the side, angled right off of his first solo record.
Neat.
And he's got the who's of the country rock people playing on this. I mean, he's got Amos Garrett from Midnight at the Oasis, James Burton,
Master of the Telecaster. Yeah.
Of course, his protege Albert Lee.
Yeah.
A lot of Ricky Skaggs, right?
Holy moly.
Ry Cooder, Hal Blaine from the Wrecking Crew.
Wow.
Jim Keltner, of course.
Keltner plays on everything.
Everything, yes. We just might as well. Elvis's piano player, Glendy Harden. Mac Renneback.
Yeah.
Of course,
Dr. John.
Dr. John, Hank DeVito, Mickey Raphael, harmonica
Holy
player for
shit.
Willie. Yeah, it goes on and on and on.
I never would. I mean, I think Rodney Crowell. I think for country music, I would give that a listen. What an all-star lineup! Holy moly!
Yes, it has beautiful, beautiful songs in here. Some covers and some originals. Just a great record. At least it was. I haven't listened to it for 30
a few years.
Yeah. I hope it holds up. Cannot go wrong.
I loved your Al Green story from last time.
I know.
The Reverend in his church.
The Reverend in his church. Well, this was before he got saved.
Right.
And that sexy, sexy, sexy Al Green. Put this on late at night and
magic will happen.
Magic will happen. Another songwriter that I just adored back in the day, John Hyatt.
Yes.
And this record, Slow Turning, was a big hit in Chicago. They played it on WXRT, I think in probably the 80s, 90s type of thing. Had that song Slow Turning on. It was quite a regional hit for him. The story on this is he made many records, often, like I think his record previous to this, Bring the Family, was Ry Cooder, Jim Keltner, and Nick Lowe.
Surprisingly, yeah.
Yeah, and he formed a band with Nick Lowe, and Ry Cooder and Jim Keltner, and it was called Little Village. Several years after this. And the story on this record is he couldn't get the studio band he wanted, so he went in with his road band and made just a beautiful, beautiful, glorious record that holds up. John Hyatt. One of my all-time favorite records in the world.
Lowell George.
Lowell George's solo record. And he made this over the course of years, and he had no idea who played on what song. So the credits are, I got no idea. Here's a bunch of people I think might have played on it. But he wears his heart on his sleeve, and it just stands up. And a great record with great playing, and really captures the spirit of Lowell for me. I think that's cover art by Van Dyke Parks.
Okay.
Who did all the Little Feat covers.
Yeah.
This was the game changer for me. I got this in high school, so it's John Mayall, Back to the Roots. And it's a collection of his songs, or a double record that he made with a bunch of different people all at once. So this is from the mid or early 70s. Back when they put great booklets like this in records, right? And he's playing on this record with people like Eric Clapton and Peter Green,
John McVie,
and Mick Fleetwood, Jack Bruce, Mick Taylor, Keith Hartley, Sugarcane Harris on violin, Larry Taylor on upright bass.
Wow. Who
went on to play, has been played for decades with Tom Waits. Just a really, he just explores the blues on this record, double record, in every iteration.
That sounds neat. I'm going to give that a listen one of these days. That I'm intrigued.
Yeah, and that was kind of my education to all of these players and that feel from back in the early 70s. Speaking of the earlier 70s, this was one of the albums that...
Oh, yeah.
That
fantastic record.
Started the weekend. Jay Giles Band, Live House. I don't think there's a live record with more energy in the world.
You might be right.
It just comes out of the gate.
Yep.
At 11,
and
it stays
true.
There.
It does.
They're in all their glory, their
yes.
magic glory. And of course, the first song out of the gate is First I Look at the Purse. And it's all about how he doesn't care about anything else about his date.
Yep.
Other than she has money.
Yep.
probably wouldn't go over too well these days.
That's all right.
But it's just a, for a testosterone-filled 16-year-old boy, this was it.
Yep.
And actually at 16, I did get to see Jay Giles.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Incredible evening where I had to convince my parents to loan me the car. It was the night before Easter Sunday, which was a big thing in our Irish Catholic household.
I can imagine.
And ended up driving an hour and a half to see them in a college auditorium. Talked our way right down to the front. Things happened that I can't really tell you about, but made a young boy grow up.
Fair enough.
And got home at 5 o'clock Easter morning. Was able to sneak into bed and then wake up with a family at 7 to pile back into the car to go to Sunday Mass.
Right.
Those were days. Also from that era,
Edgar Winter, that's a fantastic record.
Edgar Winter's White Trash. Like, they are white and they are trash.
Yeah.
And they play down, dirty, low down funk and white boy soul.
Yep.
And they've earned it.
Absolutely.
This is what they did, this beautiful horn band. And this was Edgar at his purest, I think, his roots.
Yeah.
Of course, he went on to huge success with Frankenstein and Free Ride, these big #1 hits.
Yep.
But this is him in the early days, just really
I have seen him in concert twice.
knocking it out. You have.
Yes, with Ringo. Because he's played in the All-Star Band for like 15 years.
I
And he
too
did
have seen him with
Frankenstein.
Ringo. Yes.
Yeah.
I also saw him at the Frankenstein period.
Okay.
With him and Rick Derringer on guitar.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Rick Derringer, whose biggest claim to fame is Rock and Roll
Rockin'
Hoochie.
Hoochie Coo.
Also from that era,
Holding the way.
Holding in the Way.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Jerry Garcia playing banjo
Yes.
with Vassar Clements on violin, David Grisman on mandolin.
My friend Glenn, who I've said gives me shit for not liking Dylan, is a banjo player and he worships Jerry Garcia. So this is I would imagine almost a religious artifact for Glenn.
Oh yes, well you can tell how worn it is, right?
Yeah.
And they got, was it Matt Drucker to do the cover? He's the guy that did Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
Right? How classic is
That's
that?
awesome.
And this is recorded kind of live off the floor, right?
Right.
And it's just flawless, these guys picking.
Sure.
And I think, was it Peter Rowan on guitar?
Okay.
Beautiful guitar player and singer. And of course, John Conn on bass, who played with Jerry in Legion of Mary and many of his solo projects. So, and it was just Jerry going back to his roots, having a blast. And these songs hold up. Beautiful. Then the last song, I opened this session, which is probably 2 or 3 sessions once you edit it all up, showing you my tape of the last time I recorded on tape. This record is the first record I ever recorded on.
Okay.
It's a fella from my hometown of Henry, Illinois, Rich Selquist. And so this had to be 1975, maybe 1976. And I was invited into a studio to play on a record.
Wow.
Which I had never done in my life before.
Right.
And played pedal steel and slide on a handful of songs on this, independently released record back in the mid 70s. And this first thing I played on, and I've kept it to this day, and I treasure it.
And what a road it's been.
What a road it has been. It has led me here to
my basement.
To your basement to talk about how great I used to be.
There you go.
To talk about my memories.
There you go. Well, thanks for doing that, Bob. This has been fun, and I love hearing your stories, and I love hearing about the records that you love. So.
Well, thank you, Rob, for doing what you do. You've really, by making me look through my records and engaging in all this old music, I've been really inspired to create more and to
Oh, that's great.
to get back to my roots of how much I actually love music. So thanks for the inspiration. Hopefully that inspires your listeners and viewers out there too. Go out and listen to music, people.
That's right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, man.
All right.